you breathe with me, please? Take it in. And again. And one more time. I don't know if that helps you guys, but it helps me, and I appreciate you breathing with me. It's better than the alternative. So we're continuing our exploring, I don't even think that's a word. Okay, breathe again. No, okay. We're talking about the Four Agreements, this book, written by Don Miguel Ruiz, who, you know his story, you've been hearing me talk about it. He was a medical doctor, trained in Western medicine, had a near-death experience, and brought into his healing practice more holistic practices, plus this ancient Toltec wisdom of Mexico and Central America that he had learned from his mother and his grandfather. And if you've ever seen the actual book, it's little. It's just this little book, but oh my gosh, it takes this wisdom, this incredible wisdom, and it gives us modern day ways of looking at life, but in a very thought-provoking sort of a way. So in order to understand the Four Agreements, raise your hand if you were familiar with it before we started talking about 3 weeks ago. So most everybody was familiar with it. So in order to understand what we're talking about the Four Agreements, we have to understand Don Miguel's basic premise. And his premise is that our entire lives are made up of agreements that we made when we came into this world, when we were born. We've adopted these agreements from our parents, who adopted them from their parents, who adopted them from their parents. We've learned them from our siblings, from our teachers, from our leaders, from society in general, and we have adopted a code of agreements with which we walk through life. The problem or the challenge with a lot of the agreements is that often they're based on outdated, incorrect, false ideas and beliefs. The one that I've been using is cold weather brings cold and flu season. That isn't true. Realistically, it isn't true, but we believe it because we've been told it by everybody, by the media, by our parents, by the newspapers, by the CNN page the other day was like, it's the worst flu season ever! Big red letters! How can that not get into our consciousness so that we come to believe it? And yet, not everybody gets sick when it's cold and flu season. You understand what I'm saying? It's agreements. So these mistaken ideas get perpetuated from generation to generation. Raise your hand if your mother taught you never to go outside in cold weather with wet hair because you would catch a death of cold. We don't know that that's true. But by golly, we believe it. I still don't go out with wet hair. So they get perpetuated from generation to generation, family to family, culture to culture. And what Don Miguel tells us is that many of our personal problems and many of the world problems are because of these mistaken beliefs and these outdated agreements. So what he is teaching us is four seemingly simple agreements, which if we adopt them and we apply them to our lives can drastically change our lives for the better. And I use seemingly simple in quotation marks because if you're anything like me, applying them actually is not quite as simple as he lays out in the book. Yes?
Yes.
Would you agree with me?
I don't want to agree with that.
Don't make assumptions. So, we talked last week, the first week, a couple of weeks ago, about the first agreement, which was be impeccable with your word. And we learned that being impeccable with your word doesn't just mean being honest, although it means that. And it also doesn't mean just doing what you say you're going to do, although it means that as well. Being impeccable with your word means that we need to be impeccable with how we use our word, how we speak, how we think, because we are co-creators with the divine. And when we speak our word, we are invoking the power of God. You understand what I'm saying here? We are invoking the power of God every time we think, every time we speak. So we need to be impeccable with how we do that. Last week, we learned that nothing, anything, this one got to me, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Second agreement is don't take anything personally. And that means that nothing anyone does is because of us. Nothing anyone does is because of us. Oh my God, how hard is that? Monday morning, I got an email that sure felt personal. It sure felt personal, and it was right up here in my face. And I had to do my work to remind myself that this is not about me. This is about the other person and their beliefs and their agreements and how they see the world. It has nothing to do with me. And so thereby, I don't need to take it personally. Is this making sense to you? Anything anybody does or says that it feels personal, it is about them and how they see the world. So interestingly, so many of the things that we take personally, so many of the things that we allow to hurt our feelings or to get us angry are the result of a perceived hurt or slight. In other words, when we take something personally, it's often because we have assumed that the person meant to hurt us or meant to slight us. So that brings us to our third agreement, which is don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions. Don Miguel put it like this. We make an assumption. We misunderstand, we take it personally, and we end up creating a whole big drama for nothing. All the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. Yeah? I want you to think back to a time when you made an assumption about something and you absolutely believed that it was true. And you made up this whole big scenario based on that assumption. And you reacted according to that assumption. And then you found out it wasn't true at all. Anybody?
Yeah.
Boy, is there a lot of non-eye contact right now. Be a little embarrassing, especially if we've made a drama about it, right? You guys remember the old Odd Couple TV show with Felix and Oscar? This may be a generational thing, so just bear with me. So in the Odd Couple, Felix was the finicky one and Oscar was the messy one, remember? And Oscar had just assumed so-and-so was true. And Felix whips out a chalkboard and he writes the word assume on it. You remember this? And then he separates it out and he says, when we assume, we make an ass of you and me. Remember that? Was that up here in Canada? Oh, okay, good. You know, I gotta tell you, everybody was so scandalized that he said the word ass on TV. And here I am saying it loud and proud at my spiritual center some 40 years later. But his point is well taken, that when we assume something is true, it is based on our own ideas and our own agreements and our view of life, and often we're mistaken. And often, we end up making asses of ourselves. Have you ever noticed how much of our culture is based on assumptions? I don't just mean our personal lives, although that's absolutely true. I'm really aware of it in our entertainment industry, TV shows and the movies that we watch and the books that we read. In so many of them, the characters either assume or they misunderstand something, and then they create this great drama or this great comedy out of it. And the reason for that is that absolutely nobody asks questions or tries to clarify, because that doesn't make for good entertainment. I want to share something with you. Here are a few assumptions that we might make from watching TV or movies. Oh, I need my light for this. Okay. During all police investigations, it will be necessary to visit a strip club at least once. A man will show no pain while taking the most ferocious beating, but will wince when a woman tries to clean his wounds. If staying in a haunted house, women should investigate any strange noises in their most revealing underwear. Any lock can be picked by a credit card or a paper clip in seconds, unless it's the door to a burning building with a child trapped inside. The more a man and a woman hate each other, the more likely they will fall in love. And finally, if you find yourself caught up in a misunderstanding that could be cleared up quickly with a simple explanation, for God's sake, keep your mouth shut. Do you see what I'm talking about here? It's true, isn't it? It's true. No wonder making assumptions is so prevalent in our lives, because we see it everywhere. We experience it everywhere. And the truth is that we can avoid making assumptions if we simply learn how to communicate honestly with one another. Don Miguel puts it this way. If we hear something and we don't understand, we make assumptions about what it means and then believe those assumptions. We make all sorts of assumptions because we don't have the courage to ask questions. It happens in all relationships, whether it's lovers, whether it's parents to children, boss, employee, friends. It happens between ministers and congregants. That was supposed to be funny, y'all. Yeah, I know. I used to work for someone back in the day when I did clerical work, and he believed that I should read his mind. He told me that, Pat, I want you and I need you to read my mind. The problem was, if I was wrong, which I was until I got to know him better, I would get into trouble when I made a mistake or if I didn't have the right idea, right? So I got into the habit of asking a lot of clarifying questions. I did not let up until I understood exactly what it was that he wanted. And I'm sure that it was irritating to him in the beginning. But after a while, he learned to appreciate my persistence, because the final product was usually right the first time. So clear communication is essential to relationships, all relationships, if we want that relationship to work. And when we learn to communicate, when we learn to talk to one another honestly and clearly, we don't need to make assumptions. We will know what the other person wants and needs because we've talked about it. Yes?
Yes.
Couples married a long time, yes? They looked at each other going, are you going to say yeah? Okay, I'll say yes. Here's one of the keys, folks. Here's one of the keys that Don Miguel makes, is that don't assume that other people think like you. Don't assume that other people think like you. Everybody is reacting. Everybody is thinking about things according to their agreements, according to their beliefs and the experiences that they have had. So just because you think that you've communicated something clearly doesn't mean they've heard it. Have you ever had that experience? Yes. Because we are all coming from different places. We have different ideas. We all have different agreements. And ultimately, if someone doesn't understand me or doesn't understand what it is that I want, I'm the one who's responsible for that. Now, I might blame it on the fact that they are not listening to me, but the truth is, I cannot assume that someone else knows what I want until I tell them in a way that they understand. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Those of you who don't agree with me, do you agree with me? I'm just kidding. People don't think the way we think. People don't have the same memories. They don't have the same agreements. They don't have the same belief system. Everybody is different. And the one place, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but the one place where this is super, super important, I'm told, is in love relationships. I got to ask a question. You're going to be honest with me right now, okay? Have you ever thought in your love relationship, if you loved me, I wouldn't have to tell you what I want. You should just know. Yeah, I saw a few hands. Brave man raised his hand. Yeah. Do you see the problem? Do you see the problem here? Because if our loved one assumes the wrong thing, which, let's face it, might happen, it isn't likely to go well for them. So when we love someone, shouldn't we at least set them up for success? Yeah. Here's what our founder, Ernest Holmes, said. We attract to us what we first become. Until we learn to love, we are not sending out love vibrations. And not until we send out those love vibrations can we receive love in return. So think about that. We attract to us what we first become. So we cannot have honest, healthy relationships unless we are willing to have honest, healthy communication. And that comes in part by sharing our wants and our needs with our partners rather than relying on assumptions and mind reading. So I'm going to ask another tough question. Have you ever entered into a relationship thinking, God, I hate this topic. That's not what I'm thinking. I hate this topic because I'm the one who does this. This person is not exactly what I want, but my love will change them. Yeah? You gonna get a hold of this? Yeah. Has it ever worked? Tell me. Has it ever worked? Of course not. Because people don't change because we want them to. People change because they want to change. And even if they do change, chances are it's not going to be very long lasting. They're going to go back to their old habits and we're going to be like, but I can't believe you're doing that again. I thought you changed. I thought you loved me. Well, they do love you. But when we are being honest, when we are being true to ourselves and also true to the other person, that I knew in my last relationship that his habits and patterns were his habits and patterns. They weren't going to change. Not at his advanced age. Watch this be the one Sunday he shows up. We just assume that the person is going to be so happy to be with us that they're going to give up who they are to become who we want them to be. Don Miguel said this, We don't need to justify love. It is there or not there. Real love is accepting people the way they are without trying to change them. If we try to change them, it means we don't really like them. I hated this lesson. If we try to change them, it means that we don't really like them. I mean, think about this. Why would someone need to change in order to be with us? Imagine being on the flip side of that. Those of us who are people who think people need to change. What? Imagine entering into a relationship where someone wants you to change who you are. You wouldn't find that relationship particularly satisfying, would you? No. The bottom line is, if somebody wants to change, they're going to change, but they don't want to have to change in order to be loved. Albert Einstein said, "Women marry men hoping they will change. Men marry women hoping they won't." So each is inevitably disappointed. That is, if we make assumptions. So the bottom line is, how much happier would life be if we stopped assuming and started communicating? How much happier would we all be if everyone made the agreement to stop trying to change others and just accepted them for who they are? Perfect, whole, complete expressions of God. And in the same token, what if we all worked on ourselves so that we could be the best versions of ourselves that we could be? Which leads me to next week's talk, which is called Always Do Your Best. And I will do my best to give you a meaningful and memorable experience. So what I thought would be nice, stirred some stuff up. Did it stir up for you? It stirred up for me. Okay. We're going to do a meditation right now. And John, is that you in the back? Is John here? Here he is. Could you come noodle? Thanks. That's music terms, you know. Noodle. Not canoodle. That's something different. You don't do the canoodling, all right. See? We didn't make assumptions. He doesn't canoodle. I got it. So I invite you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And just relax. For the next few moments, there's nothing you need to be doing. Take a deep breath. Listen to these words written by Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder. There is a presence and a perfect law irresistibly drawing into my experience everything which makes life happy and worthwhile. Friendship, love, and happiness belong to me. Only good can go forth from me. The good that I receive is but the completion of a circle, the fulfillment of my desire for all. I no longer judge according to appearances, be they mental or physical. Freedom and joy are mine today. This freedom and joy spontaneously express themselves in my experience. I permit them to flow through me in all their wonder and might. I am conscious of an infinite wisdom directing me. Whatever I ought to know, I know. Whatever I ought to do, I shall do. Whatever belongs to me will come to me. I am compelled to recognize my good, to understand and accept it, and to act upon it. Therefore, I declare that every step of my way is guided and guarded. And with joy, I enter into the fulfillment of life. And with these words anchoring into our consciousness, I absolutely know that each of us takes these words, takes this message with us, takes it to heart, and we commit to honest communication. We commit to loving those in our lives without trying to change them. And we commit to doing the work for ourselves to be our very best expression of the one. I give thanks for this truth. I know it is the truth. Therefore, I simply release it. I let it be so. And together we affirm. And so it is. Thank you. And I bet you guys would love to hear from Amy again, wouldn't you?